So I was recording these singing mantras earlier today, and trying to share some of that practice, and I'm going to share more of it and figure out how to do that in a way that makes sense. But I just wanted to talk a little bit about singing mantras in a little bit of a longer form video, because I really do. There are a lot of practices that I've learned in the past couple of years that I've learned in the past couple of years that absolutely overlay with everything that is cutting edge in modern psychology in the West. And they're these ancient practices that nobody really has ever, it seems like people don't really cross-reference and recognize why it might be that people have been singing mantras and chanting and things like that for thousands of years. But your state of consciousness is more than just your mood. So your state of consciousness is like your way of being, and it encompasses your mood and the emotions that you're feeling, and it encompasses like the ego state that you are showing to the world, like what character you're playing at the time and things like that. Whether you're putting on your face to go to work, or whether you're being a mom, or whether you are, doing anything, you have different kind of states of being. But a state of consciousness, it kind of is overarching of all of this. So this is a general unshaking state of your mind, of your nervous system, your entire energetic body. The state of your consciousness itself is different from your mood. And most people, but it is correlated, it's absolutely integral, and it is everything to do with your wellness in life. But in Western psychology, we don't really talk about states of consciousness at all. I mean, at least we don't talk about them in a way that's like useful for counseling and therapy and trauma healing, or at least in my experience, I've discovered a lot of stuff about consciousness that would have been extremely useful when doing therapy with clients who had things like eating disorders and sexual abuse and other different types of trauma. I mean, and let me tell you, I also want to say, like, I feel like all the clients I ever saw are trauma victims. That's just what happens when there's damage to somebody, is trauma. But we never talked about consciousness and how trauma fundamentally affects your state of consciousness and your ability to engage in the world, and your ability to engage with other people, the ability to be creative and execute plans, to have goals, to dream, to do anything in a way that is conducive to wellness and that is supportive of your well-being. It's all to do with your state of consciousness. That's what I'm trying to say. I get mixed up because I have a trauma brain, and a trauma brain looks a lot like an ADD, or like the symptoms of a trauma brain look a lot like symptoms of ADD, by the way. But the same stuff happens to a brain that's undergone trauma, where you kind of lose your train of thought and stuff like that really easily. But so anyway, so your state of consciousness is super important. We never talk about it really in school that I did, and I think there's cutting edge stuff about use of psychedelic and mushrooms and different substances like that to help people to shift their state of consciousness, which has this effect of really improving the well-being of all the all the other different aspects of your life. If you can shift your state of consciousness, then you'll see that you have a fundamentally different view and experience in every other area of your life. Most people don't shift their states of consciousness more than 1 or 2 levels in their lifetime. So this means that if you kind of are in a state of consciousness that's gravitating at a level that might have some negative stuff mixed in, where you are very susceptible to depression and things like that, it's unlikely that, at least in the West, the way that our society is set up, it's unlikely that your level of consciousness, even if you can recover from depression and get medicated and get all the best treatments, it's unlikely that your state of consciousness is actually going to go up that much, because we don't do anything to facilitate people changing their perspectives. The best that we do is therapy, and therapy is great, but it is a lot more intensive to change somebody's state of consciousness than going to therapy can possibly cover. Going to therapy once a week for an hour with somebody who you don't trust at the beginning because you've been traumatized, it takes sessions upon sessions. We know this as therapists, but we ignore it. Or most therapists I see out in the world ignore this fact. Like, you can't do therapy until somebody has a safe relationship with their therapist. And if you're traumatized, it is extremely difficult to develop a safe relationship. The reason this is because your state of consciousness has all these different programmings in it that prevent you from being able to bond and being able to engage in reality as it is happening, and engage in perceiving reality from a realistic, aligned perspective, which means that there are ways hang on 1 minute. Pause for a second. My neighbor's over there. Sorry, my neighbor was out there, and I felt awkward because that neighbor, don't even get me started on that neighbor. That is a story for another time. Bad neighbors. They don't even know my name. Yeah, so states of consciousness, and they've lived there 2 years. So in therapy, we are not taught to address or even taught about the concept of state of consciousness. I have a bachelor's in psychology and practically have a minor in philosophy with it, and did minor in French, and language has everything to do with your state of consciousness as well. But so what I was getting at is that state of consciousness is a very, very important thing, and if you can access your state of consciousness and shift your state of consciousness, then you shift a lot more than your mood, and you shift a lot more than just your ability to get through the day. You can really, really, really shift how your body is storing its memories, how your body stores the traumas that you've endured, everything that you've been through. You can shift the stories that your mind is telling yourself about what those stories say about you, because your state of consciousness has everything to do with your own beliefs about yourself and what you're capable of. So if you can figure out a way to access your state of consciousness, then you can change a lot of things. And it's amazing. And nobody in Western counseling and psychology talks about this in an accessible way. And it's because you can't brand it. It's because it's already ancient wisdom, and you can't brand singing mantras. Nobody is going to pay attention. There's not a brand that nobody can make money off of it. Nobody can make money studying it, because it's already all there. And people know this. More than half the globe know about this stuff. It's like people haven't put it together with how the neuroscience actually works, and it makes complete sense that it would correspond that if you can change your state of consciousness, that you can change pretty much everything about you except for your experience of, the things that you actually like about yourself, like the parts of your personality that you do like. So what we're talking about is that, in trauma, your state of consciousness, a lot of times what happens is that you have a traumatic impact, a traumatic event hits, and your consciousness scatters in order to take the impact, in order to process what has happened. Your consciousness, your ability to be in the moment, and your grounding and your centeredness in that moment of those of trauma, or the extended moments of trauma, your consciousness moves itself around in order to avoid experiencing the worst parts of the traumatic event. So your brain, your nervous system is already doing this stuff, and it does it to take care of you when bad shit happens. Your consciousness shifts. Now, what we don't acknowledge is that we actually have full control over our state of consciousness as it is. So we don't have to wait for our body to experience a trauma in order to actually shift our state of consciousness. It just takes a little bit of work, a little bit of intention is more what I should say. It's not that complicated. And you can do it with really, really simple things like singing mantras, which is just one little tiny thing that I want to share among, there's so many things I want to share. And this is just one teeny, teeny, tiny thing. But singing mantras. Okay, so I sang, if I sing that mantra, I was getting emotionally flooded about a ridiculous situation earlier. And if I sing, and I went into everything is okay, this does not reflect on me, I am okay, I'm safe. And what came to me was one of these mantras, and that I really like, which is the Rama da sa sa se so hung. And you can just keep doing it over and over again, and it's cadence and the way that you sing it when you sing it, and the repetition all serve to help integrate your consciousness. Because what you're doing, you're not only flooding your thoughts, which are usually running their mouths. You have a bunch of different thoughts running, voices and things running all the time, telling you about what you need to do and what you don't need to do, and all these judgmental thoughts, your self-critics. If you can insert words into your brain, the words take over all the different levels of your consciousness that have access to that type of language that uses words. So when you sing or say words in your head, instead of the flooding thoughts and feelings taking over, the words that you are inserting are the ones that are able to take out and take over and harmonize your thoughts. Because if you are thinking Rama da sa sa se so hung over and over again, there is not room for you to be thinking about all the bad stuff that your inner critic is trying to tell you about whatever situation is going on. And with this particular mantra, it's talking about, I am the truth, I am infinity, infinity is in me, I am divine, and it does not matter what the world tells me about whether I'm good enough or whether I'm safe, because I know in my heart who I am and what my truth is. And there is something I am telling you, this I don't know how to explain, I sort of do, but it's more difficult to explain this part using the context of Western neuroscience. But all those Sanskrit syllables, those are called bij syllables, and they're the original sounds of the universe as it is birthing itself. Those are the original sounds that are made. So you might know that Om is the sound that is believed to represent, but it actually is really the sound that the universe made when it started. And these are other syllables that kind of came in close succession after that. Rama, da, sa, se, so, hung. Not in that order, but this is a conglomeration of some of these very original sounds of consciousness, of language, that we then interpret as language. And so your cells, your DNA, innately understand what these mean. And whether represents a concept that is easy to put into other words or English words doesn't matter, because your cells understand what Ra, Ma, Da, Sa, Se, So, Hung means. Your cells know this. This is intelligence that's passed down through the mechanism of our DNA and the transcription that happens. All of these are base sounds that make up the vibration of the entire universe. And when you say them, you flood your thoughts and you take away thoughts that aren't real. And you're also inserting harmonizing thoughts. When, kind of dark, isn't it? Sun went down really fast. So you're harmonizing your thoughts. You're literally harmonizing your state of consciousness. You're harmonizing your state of being. What you're doing too is like, you know when you get a song stuck in your head that you can't get out? This is you using that little trick of the brain and using it to your advantage. You're creating your own earworm, and it's an empowering earworm. There are so many different mantras that you can use. This is just one of them, and I'll demonstrate other ones, but this is just such a powerful practice, and it's so simple. It's so simple. And when you sing, you're vibrating in a sustained vibration. You're using your voice to vibrate your entire body as an instrument. And when you do that, every cell in your body is vibrating with the sounds of these Bij syllables about the beginning of the earth and about infinity being in you, about your godliness, about your own divinity, which everyone is divine. And it's your state of consciousness is the only thing that prevents you from knowing this. So work on your state of consciousness. If it's too big of a concept to even wrap your head around, if you're in trauma, then none of the rest of this is this is all going to be it's too much for somebody who's in a state of crisis or trauma to process. But these tips this is so easy to teach to somebody who is in trauma. Teach a simple Sanskrit mantra and either sing it. It doesn't matter how you sing it, but just kind of do it this one has its own tune and notes that you're supposed to do. But you can do these in your own way as well. And I would recommend keeping it to maybe one or two notes and just kind of a simple melody is what I'm saying, and repeat. And when you do this, if you're in a state of emotional flooding or a state of emotional crisis, you are telling a cell that's in crisis, you are snapping it from crisis to divinity, and you're bridging those two things, and it's like the most direct way that you could possibly communicate to your cells. This isn't real. Don't store this as trauma. These feelings are not about something that's real. So if you're feeling overwhelmed by something like somebody telling you that they aren't in love with you, or anything, any goddamn thing, sorry, my language, but if you're feeling overwhelmed by anything, any beliefs that you have about yourself, anything traumatizing, sing yourself safe. And if you can't sing, it doesn't matter if you can sing or not. It's just about vibrating your voice in a way. And I'm talking about the noise that comes out of your body using your vocal cords. That's what I mean. You just are vibrating that and just do it. It doesn't matter whether you can carry a tune, whether you feel like you have a good voice or not. Just vibrating that is this integral instrument that we have of healing. And it is amazing if you can start accessing it and using it to your advantage. And if you are in a situation where you can't sing, you can sing it in your head. And that has almost as good of an effect, if not the same. You just have to have practiced a little bit, and then when you do it in your head and your imagination, it has basically the same effect. So it's like this magic trick. And so the other thing, yeah, it's just amazing. And I love the Sanskrit syllables, not only because I really do believe that our cells and our DNA like recognize the syllables fundamentally, but I love that it's vocalizations that don't otherwise have an association, that don't otherwise trigger you in some way, because our language is loaded with triggers. Just even certain words can upset you. I'm sure that you can think of words that might trigger you in certain ways, like things that people have said to you in a weird way that it's just like you can't hear that word again without it making you feel icky or something like that. Like I'm thinking about like my very first boyfriend when I was in high school. Like he broke up with me, and after like 2 weeks, and asked if we could be platonic. And it's like I hadn't even heard anybody ever say that word really, and I like knew what he was meaning, but it was like, oh yeah, sure, of course. But it's like I've never been able to hear that word ever again without like going straight back into like, oh my God, I'm being broken up with. Somebody doesn't love me. I must be like, there's something, what's so wrong with me? But when you use these so that's just an example of how much our language is loaded with associations and triggers. And so just a simple way to get around that and not even have to bother digging into where your triggers are. Sanskrit is so beautiful, and it really does. It's amazing. And you can, Google any of this stuff. Google Sanskrit mantras and find words and syllables that mean something to you and that really resonate with you. This is crazy that it got so dark while I was talking. But thank you for listening. This is Alice Anahata, the witch in the glen. And there's a bat going over.